Welcome, everyone. Very hot mic. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jamie Woodson. I have the privilege of serving as the chairman of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. We're really excited to be in Dayton today. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and call the roll. Madam Secretary.
Chad Baker.
Here.
Tony Sanders.
Here.
Connie King.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Angie Box.
Here.
Dennis Gardner.
Here.
Bill Swan.
Here.
Brian McLaren.
Here.
Kent Woods.
Here.
James Stroud. Kurt Holbert.
Here.
Jeff Cook.
Here.
Jamie Woodson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Chair detects quorum, and we'll go ahead. We do have several announcements and very special guests who have joined us today. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome our newest colleague, Commissioner Tony Sanders, this is his first meeting. We are thrilled that you will be joining us as a colleague. And would you like to just say hello and introduce yourself? We're in your neck of the woods, so I want to make sure you have that opportunity.
Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to serving with this group, and it's so nice of you to come here for my first meeting. I really appreciate that. So thank you, but I am looking forward to it.
Thank you, Commissioner. We're looking forward to working with you too. We also have a lot of folks who've come from around the state to join us today, but also being in his backyard, I'd be remiss if I didn't give him an opportunity to welcome everyone, and that's my friend and former colleague, Representative Ron Travis, who's the state representative here in this community. We're thrilled that you're with us, and thank you for letting us come to your town.
Thank you. It was great. I want to thank everyone.
And actually, State Rep, you know how it is. We want to make
yeah.
sure that the world gets to see your beautiful face. If you want to talk into the microphone, so the world can hear you. Yes, we want everyone on the World Wide Web to be able to hear your voice.
I don't know.
Ron, your face is red.
I know. Hi, Jamie.
They make me do that, Ron.
Probably not the first time Jamie's called you that.
No, I would never do that.
I don't know how this works. Is it working now? Oh,
Yes,
you.
sir.
They,
Perfect.
They did it over there. Well, hey, I'm Ron Travis, and I'm representative of District 31. I want to thank you guys for having your annual meeting here in Ray County, Dayton, Tennessee, at Bryan College. This is big for us. I mean, this is, the TWRA means so much for this area, and I want to thank each and every one of you and the guests and the members here today for coming to Ray County. I appreciate it, Jamie.
Thank you so much. And Representative Travis, we appreciate your leadership. I've had the privilege of working with you now for several years, and we're very proud to be in Ray County today. We try to get around the state and get to learn about the incredible resources that are managed by this agency and learn a little bit deeper about what the needs are. And we've been treated as very special guests here, and we appreciate it.
Well, I thank you, and again, I thank you guys. And now I'm going to depart so I can go sell some insurance.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. We also have several folks with the Department of Agriculture. Boyd Barker is with us today. We appreciate you for joining us. A very, very special guest, and I don't know where she sat down. Vicki Swan, Commissioner Swan's bride, is here. She's in the very back, being humble as usual, but we're thrilled you're here with us, Vicki. Also, Mike Butler with the Wildlife Federation is here with us today, as well as we also have with the Music City Quail Forever group, Bob Qualman, who's joined us today. I appreciate him making the trip. I do want to say just really quickly for our Region 3 team, we've had a big morning learning about Hiawassee, learning about so much of the services and work that the agency does. We really appreciate the hospitality, the setup, the effort here at Bryan College. Y'all have gone above and beyond to create a teaching moment for those of us on commission, and we really do appreciate all the hard work and look forward to continuing to learn with you, so thank you. We do wonder if the Fisheries Division has a beard requirement for employment, but that's perhaps for another day. But we also just very, very quickly, because we are here at Bryan College, and if anybody noticed when they came into town, what a big and important industry really fishing is in this community. But we have two very special folks with us, Assistant Coach Perrin and Coach Keene, who are with us from the fishing team. And I had thought that we were going to miss them today because they're literally on their way to Pickwick. They are on the verge, this team here at Bryan College, of achieving Cabela's School of the Year. And it's a big week for Bryan College, and you all have been incredibly successful. We're excited about that. We also know that you've got some, was it Coach King, your son, as I recall, caught the largemouth bass in the state so far. Is that right? So this is a deep tradition here in the community. There's a lot going on at Bryan College, and we wish you and your team the best of luck this week and hope you bring home all the success that you're hoping for. Congratulations. But really looking forward to the day ahead. We do have and I know that any announcements from the agency before we get started?
I have is that the Director Carter is on the way. He should be here soon, so you're stuck with me until then.
Great. For any of my colleagues, any announcements or recognition that you'd like to do before we get started in committees? Excellent. Well, just a couple of thoughts as we get started. We've got a lot of important business, and particularly early in the year, it's one of our, in terms of the business that the committees and then full commission tomorrow will cover. We've got a lot on our plates today that will be very important and serious issues for sportsmen and women all across the state. And I just want to kind of frame at least how I'm approaching some of the big issues we have before us today, and just want to encourage us as we, regardless of the proposal, regardless of the issue, how we might consider thinking through these important issues. As a reminder, the mission of the agency is to create, maintain, and grow opportunities for current and future generations of Tennesseans to enjoy the outdoors, particularly hunting and fishing. And as I think about the things that I hope will guide our decisions, we know that particularly if we're thinking about future generations of Tennesseans and what opportunities they might have, really thinking intentionally about what the impact on the resource will be as we set seasons, as we make important decisions, and what will the impact of a particular proposal be on the resource is a really important question for us. Might want to ask ourselves, what are the facts that we have, and what information do we have available to us, what data to help base our decisions and about what that impact will be. Got a lot of good information and expertise from the agency and from external experts, whether it's the science, public comment, survey data over multiple years so it can inform and guide our decisions. It would be my great hope that we would not guide our decisions based on anecdote or rumor or opinion, although opinion is important because we are a public servicing agency and we want to be very responsive, but we want to guide our decisions based on data and the most reliable data that we can. I also want to think about the characteristics that I think we aspire to as we make these decisions. I hope that when we describe how we go about our business, hello Commissioner Stroud, welcome, that we will make decisions strategically, that we will really think about what are our overall goals and is this a means for us to achieve those goals, that we are transparent, that we're open, we don't surprise folks, whether it's the public, each other, or our partners within the agency, and that we would really be thoughtful to be consistent. If we make a decision that that has weight to it, that we try to give the public, our partners within the agency, each other, and citizens across the state something of consistency in how we would treat important decisions. And so got a lot on our plate, but certainly as I think about how I reconcile, regardless of the issues in my own mind, that's how I'll be approaching these issues. And really look forward to the important weight that different committees will be considering today and throughout the year. And unless there are any other comments, we'll go ahead and move into committees, and I'll turn it to Chairman Cook.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'd like to recognize Mark Goodland, the Chief of Wildlife and Forestry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. At the April Commission meeting, we presented harvest season success from our big game seasons from last fall, and we also previewed our recommendations for changes for hunting and trapping of our resident game species for the upcoming season, 2017-18 season. So today, we are ready to present to the Wildlife Committee for action our recommendations on the changes to several proclamations that would affect this upcoming season. Also included in the presentations will be information trying to address questions and concerns that were raised by the Commission at the last meeting, as well as any relevant public comments that we received before and after the April meeting. With that, the first proclamation that we will present is 17-03, which is the big game seasons and bag limits. And our first presenter is James Kelly, who is our deer program leader.
And just because we have so many presentations today on so many different topics, I thought what we would do is go ahead and get this matter before us by asking for a motion to approve Proclamation 17-03, and then we can proceed with, I think it would be better if we discuss each of the topics after presenters, and we can discuss any amendments we might want to make or any details there. I think it'll make it more efficient. So do I have a motion to approve? And a second? So, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As Mark said, I'm James Kelly. I'm the Deer Management Program Leader, and I just want to very briefly address a couple questions that remained after Chuck Yost, our Assistant Chief of the Wildlife and Forestry Division, presented at the last meeting. There were a few, well, really a couple questions remaining after that, so I just wanted to clarify or answer those questions, rather. So before I dig into that or dive into some harvest data from last year or this past season, just want to reiterate that the agency is not recommending any changes for the upcoming deer season. So first, and before really getting into the questions, I just kind of want to set the stage a little bit and kind of revisit some of the stuff that Chuck shared at the April meeting. And this graph is showing the reported harvest, or trends in reported harvest by sex, bucks and does. And you can see that there was a 6% decline this past season compared to the previous season. However, overall it looks, the trends in the harvest look relatively stable. And so this is one source of data that we use to kind of monitor the harvest and make inferences about the population. This is reported harvest. And then the flip side of that is our deer check data, or the deer that we as an agency get our hands on, and we age them, and if it's a buck, we'll collect antler measurements, beam diameter, beam length, and things like that. And so that's really where the questions came in. So I just want to talk about a couple graphs that were shared last time, and there was some confusion about the difference between the two graphs. And so this is the first graph that I wanted to just further explain. So this is showing the age composition of the buck harvest. And this is, again, based on the animals that we, as an agency, and we also have agency partners, such as university folks and students that get some experience with checking deer. And this is at check stations throughout the state where we can sample some of the deer that are harvested statewide, and it's about 5,000, a little over 5,000 on average that we get our hands on. and that we can age. And so this, again, is showing the buck harvest, not antlered or antlerless. This is male deer. And so every deer that we get our hands on is going to fall into one of these 4 categories: fawn, yearling, 2.5 to 3.5, or 4.5 plus. Now, I want to point out real quick that we will age them 2.5 or 3.5. I just combine them for presentation purposes. So I kind of want to pause there. Does that make sense, commissioners, what this is being depicted here? I want to make sure you are understanding what's being presented here. Okay. And as you can see, there is a general trend in a declining proportion of yearlings in the harvest, which has kind of been the intent of some of the recent rule changes in the recent past, particularly the 2-buck limit, and also the change of the antler deer definition this past year was also to protect more younger bucks. And you can see that the proportion of fawns in the harvest, that area under the 2016 on the far right in the red, that's the lowest it's ever been at 4%. However, our proportion of yearlings actually increased this year. It's kind of hard to tell from that graph, but that actually increased. So just wanted to, I think that makes sense. So that was the one chart, and I think Commissioner Cox, you had a question about this chart versus the previous chart. So this chart is showing, it's using the exact same data set. That's all the bucks that we got our hands on statewide and aged. And every buck is either less than 3 inches of antler or greater than or equal to 3 inches of antler. Again, this is not antlered versus antlerless. This is bucks in the harvest. And so depicted in dark green is the percentage of the buck harvest with less than 3 inches of antler. And this is almost always going to be all of the fawns in the harvest and then some of the yearlings. So to put it into perspective, the 2 graphs, I'm going to show a little animation there. Let me go back real quick. You'll see in 2016, there was 12% of the buck harvest had less than 3 inches of antler. So if we drew that 12% on the other graph, let's take a look at 2016 in the upper right-hand corner. Again, it's going to be all of your fawns and then some of your yearlings. There's a little, I don't know if you could see that, a little animation there. So that's the difference between the 2 graphs. And so before I go any further, commissioners, does this make sense now, the difference between the 2 graphs? Commissioner Cox is scratching his head, so. This is, I'd like to, if there's a question, I'd like to clarify before I go further, if there is any.
You've got less than 3 inches of antler, so anything from a button buck to up to 3 inches is now considered a yearling.
No, this is not showing age. This is showing the percentage of the buck harvest with less than 3 inches of antler. And mainly this, we're presenting this to show the impacts of the definition of an antler deer that we changed. I wasn't here when that was changed, but it's my understanding that the intent was to protect more of that segment of the population by basically making them in the antlered category versus antlerless. So if that was the objective, let's see if I can use this drawing tool right here. If that were the objective, you would expect, if it worked, and if our objective was to decrease this percentage, you kind of would expect it to go down. And what our results show is that it actually did the opposite. It increased. It went from around 7 or 8% up to 12%. It was statistically significant, but what is that biologically significant? We don't know. And is it conclusively because of the antler definition change? Well, we can't really say because as you can see over here, in 2007, it was statistically significantly higher in that year. So it could be the same phenomenon that's happened, whatever happened in 2007 could have happened in 2016. But all other years, these are called confidence intervals. To make it simple, those are your margin of error. And you can see in all other years, all of the confidence intervals are overlapping. So in other words, they didn't change. And then this year, it did change. So that was that question that I wanted to address.
So if the goal, was the goal achieved?
It looks like no. It looks like we moved the needle in the opposite direction. If the intent was to protect that segment of the population, less than 3 inches of antler, it looks like no. And you know, it is plausible that it was because of the antler, because we changed the definition, that percentage went up. Because previously anything less than 3 inches of antler was antlerless, and despite having very liberal or more liberal antlerless bag limits and much more liberal antlerless bag limits in Unit L, our antlered harvest almost always exceeds our antlerless, indicating that there's more pressure on the antlered segment of the population, more harvest pressure. And now we've moved that line down to visible above the hairline. So now that portion of the population that was previously antlerless is now in the more pressured segment, the antlered segment. So it is plausible that that's what's happening. But again, we want to see what happens next year. If that percentage is again higher next year, we can be pretty confident that it was our definition change that moved it in that direction, because we've never had 2 years in a row where that percentage was higher.
Well, it seems because of this, and also because the yearling harvest went up. And also because we intended for the doe harvest to go up and it went down.
Correct.
So it just appears to me that the unintended consequence is that it didn't work.
It might not have worked 1 year, but just as 2007 went up for no obvious reason, it dropped back down to a more on the norm in 2008 for no obvious reason, correct? Things vary.
In
from year to year.
2007,
it increased and then dropped back in 2008 to the norm without any regulation changes. It just varied that year.
yeah, the only thing, so in 2007, and maybe some of you remember, that was the year of a very large EHD outbreak. So that was a significant event, but I don't know why that would cause that result. I suspect it's probably has some indirect effect there, but again, I don't know.
I think that's my point. We don't know, and things vary from year to year, and 1 year is just not enough to make a determination. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's the agency's recommendation, is to wait at least 1 more year to evaluate that.
I do have a question. Excuse me. I do have a question about the 2016, I'm getting hoarse, antlered harvest for the yearlings. If it's not classifying button bucks now as antlered deer, what would it be that would cause that to go up?
I'm not sure if I'm following the
Okay,
question.
excuse me. On 2016, your percentage of less than 3 inches of deer harvested has increased. If that's not counting button bucks, which were previously counted as does or antlerless deer, if that's not counting them as antler deer, what would be the reason that would go up in that category?
Well, this is including all the fawns, all the buck fawns, whether they're protruding above the hairline or they're below the hairline. this would include all of them. So each year's worth of data here includes all fawns. So basically, if we got our hands on it and had less than 3 inches of antler,
So, excuse me, so that's not just the deer that are considered antlered deer that were the young deer then, right? That
right,
less
this
than
is
3
if it
inches.
was a male
That
and
was
if it had,
any button buck or any deer with less than 3 inches of antler.
right, which is going to be, again, all of your fawns are going to have less than 3 inches of antler. And then some of your yearlings, and usually it's your yearlings that were born later in the fawning season the previous year. They're a little bit behind developmentally, and so they'll sometimes have a very small spike. So I'm going to move on to the other question. It was Commissioner Swan had a question about Kentucky, and the question was, why did they change it to their current rule, which is a male or female deer with any antler protruding above the hairline, or visible antler protruding above the hairline, excluding male fawns. So I'm just going to kind of set the context here. Kentucky is a one antler deer state, or a one buck state, if you will, and so that's a big difference in and of itself. And so just want to keep that in mind. And they've actually changed their rules several times over the past 2 decades. And they originally changed it with the kind of the same intent that we had, was going to more a QDM approach, protect more young bucks. And again, this was about 2 decades ago. And the first so they started with a male or female deer with any antler on a side greater than or equal to 3 inches. Essentially the same thing that we used to have. And again, they wanted to go to a more QDM style, protect more young bucks, or basically those bucks that had less than 3 inches of antler. So they went to a male or female deer with any polished antler protruding above the hairline. And they only were with this rule for a year because they ran into a lot of issues with velvet bucks, and velvet is technically hair, and so there was a loophole there. So then the next year they went to a male or female deer with a visible antler protruding above the hairline, and they actually stuck with this for about 12 years. Chuck told me I could share with you all that he was mistaken last time. He thought that they stuck with this one for only 1 year, but it was actually the previous one, the polished antler. So they actually stuck with the visible antler protruding above the hairline for 12 years. And then just a few years ago, that's when they changed to a male or female deer, excluding male fawns, with the visible antler protruding above the hairline. Now the question was, why did they do that? Based on my discussions with my counterpart in Kentucky, it was they felt it was an enforcement issue, the visible antler protruding above the hairline. They were having folks accidentally shooting what they thought was an antlerless deer. They get up to it, it's actually protruding above the hairline a little bit, and that was their 1 buck for the year. And so they were checking it in as an antlerless deer anyway. And so they excluded male fawns to try to alleviate some of that. Personally, I don't think we want to go down that road because it adds ambiguity, subjectivity because they didn't provide a definition of what a male fawn was. So it's kind of a wild card where you can just use that male fawn exclusion, and even if it was a yearling with 1 inch of antler. So basically, if they didn't see it had antler until they got up to it, they could just check it in under this male fawn category because there's no definition of a male fawn. Now, if we did go down this road, I would like us to provide a definition of a male fawn, which would be based on the number of molars on the lower jaw. Basically, if it had less than or equal to 5 molars, that would make it a fawn.
I do have one question, though, is if Kentucky was having that problem, what makes you think that we don't have the same problem here in Tennessee?
Well, I don't know, I don't know that it is a problem. I guess I'd have to defer to law enforcement as to whether it is a problem or not.
We've seen no significant increase in citations or warnings because of the law change.
And again, we're a $2 state where, for most of the season, and depending on where you are in your antler bag, if you do make a mistake, you could use one of your 2 antler deer to cover a mistake, whereas that issue would be amplified in Kentucky being a $1 state.
I'd like to make one statement, and the commissioners have heard my rant in an email.
Bill.
I started deer hunting
Hey,
in
Bill,
the,
Commissioner Swan, this is a committee day, and so if we could hold that till tomorrow, thank you.
all right.
Okay. Yeah, so if we did go down this road, I think we would need to make it black and white, and then I guess it would be up to our commissioners if we want that extra, because would be quite a bit of training, education on how to, where does one molar end and the next molar start, because it can be, when you're first learning how to age a jawbone, it can be a little bit tricky. So anyway, I just wanted to provide a clear answer on Kentucky's approach. And one more thing I wanted to add here, because it's ambiguous, they're essentially back to where they're started with less than 3 inches of antler, because that's where that rule comes from, is about the length of a deer's ear, maybe a little bit shorter, but that's usually where visibility starts to get inhibited a little bit. So, and I want to reiterate that the agency isn't making any recommendations for the upcoming deer season. We just wanted to make sure the committee and the rest of the commissioners were clear on those issues or questions that remained from last time.